Hey there, welcome to the Bronx Buzz. This is Bronx Net's program. We talk to reporters and writers and editors and filmmakers. And in this case, in the second part of our show, we're going to talk to a executive, so to speak, who runs a book programs here in the Bronx. And I think he's got something coming up that I think you're going to enjoy. But to get started, let's roll up our sleeves. And I have rolled up my sleeves today. And we're going to say hello to the senior state politics reporter for City and State New York, our buddy Rebecca Lewis. Nice to see you, Rebecca.
Good to see you too. Thanks for having me on.
Are you all recovered from the primary? I know you worked real hard.
Getting there.
All right.
I got to get ready for the general election in November.
I know we'll all be there. Although in the Bronx, it's usually not that exciting because we're pretty much a one-party system here in some ways. Although people running in the 14th Council District against Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez probably don't agree with that assessment. Nonetheless, so this was interesting. Let's just run through. So Adriano Espaillat, who has a part of the Bronx in his district, won quite handily with 80% of the vote. Jamal Bowman in the 16th CD, which was redistricted, and he only has a small sliver of the Bronx, also won quite handily with, it looked like 90% to 91% of the vote. I'll start here. Alessandra Biaggi, who was a state senator here, took, I think, a risk and ran against an incumbent in a district she hadn't worked on before. Do you think her political career has ended? I mean, because she lost, and now she's going to have to give up her state Senate seat.
It's tough to come back from a lost congressional race, especially when you've given up a seat in another legislature in order to do it. There's probably nothing stopping her from trying to run again in 2 years. We certainly saw in Manhattan, Queens, Serge Patel ran more than one time several years in a row, and he hasn't seen success yet, but he's kept coming back and running for office. So
you think maybe she could run again? It's a fascinating kind of quirk because Natalia Fernandez is a state assembly member. She happened to win her race, but she had no risk because it was on a different ballot. Just a fascinating thing. And I do think that for Senator Biaggi, she's more equipped in her mind to run for Congress because she sees the issues as large issues. I don't think she, was a great constituent server, so to speak, as a state senator. Anyway, much more challenging was the race in the 33rd senatorial district between Gustavo Rivera and Miguelina Camilo. As we well know, the Bronx Democratic Party supported not the incumbent in this case and have a little bit of egg on their face. What do you think played here? Incumbency? Incumbents won pretty much down the line, huh?
It was a good night for incumbents. And I know that it was probably, I believe, the closest race between an incumbent and an insurgent challenger, certainly in the city. I believe
it's 51-46 was this
in the Democratic Party as well. I think there was a pretty close Republican primary upstate on the other side of the aisle. But, it was certainly incumbency definitely helped. But there was a lot of outside spending in that race, a lot of independent expenditures and super PAC spending in opposition to Gustavo Rivera that, at least his campaign said is a big factor of why the race wound up being so close. And obviously the Bronx Democrats, you can't discount the influence that they have, getting people on the ground, volunteers, literature, and as well as Adriano Espaillat, who has had a lot of success recently in getting his candidates elected to various offices, various levels of government. He endorsed Miguelina Camilo, and she was one of two candidates for him this time around, and it came up short in both races.
Yeah. We did the debate between the two of them, and she was highly qualified. I make no bones about it. I thought she was very well spoken. But this whole Robert Jackson was not happy with Adriano Espaillat, because here's an incumbent who serves in a an adjacent area, or maybe even part of the same area that Congressman Espaillat serves. I wonder if this race will change some of the, I don't know, imperatives that the Democratic Party sees, that maybe they would evaluate. I don't know, who they like better, or rather than just kind of like couch the politics of it. I mean, this was a big progressive versus moderate elect primary that came up many times. What do you think of that? Of some change now as a result of the way this came down?
I don't know if it's going to have too much of a change. If you look at, for example, like the candidates,
Perhaps.
the candidates that Eric Adams endorsed,
Yes.
the candidates that the incumbents that he endorsed against, for example, were all lawmakers who probably weren't his biggest fans anyway, were lawmakers who probably were not super prone to being his allies in Albany to begin with. He endorsed against a number of progressives. He endorsed for people like Kevin Parker, who are already his allies. The fact that his candidates didn't win means, he's not going to have influence, in Albany. He already doesn't really have much influence, as we've seen. He's got a very a tense relationship with Albany lawmakers, as we've seen in his first year in office. But none of the people that he endorsed against are people that he had really great relationships to begin with. And Adriano Espaillat, he has been showing his hand recently in terms of trying to get candidates that he supports elected. He only got involved in 2 races, so uh, he's not
Well,
really
let's see. And he
alienating
lost both of them.
large. He
Yeah,
did
but
he lost
he
both of
lost
them,
both
but
of those. Yeah.
he did lose both of them. So it's a little bit of a tarnish on his record after some successes in the assembly and the city council. But he very strategically chose his battles, and so his candidates didn't make it to the state senate, but he won his own reelection handily. He still has the candidates that he is connected to in the other levels of government, and he didn't go out of his way
Yeah.
to make enemies of other people.
I
He
look.
really chose his battles.
He's going to be okay. This to me is where this falls, and that's why the 34th senatorial district in the Bronx was fascinating. I think the Democratic Party statewide and really nationally has to come to grips with this progressive versus moderate thing, because rather than see where they're on the same page and say, well, we're all Democrats and we agree on certain fundamental things, just how we're going to handle it, they're at odds, and it's allowed them to split the party. So in the case of Rivera and Jackson's 2 so-called progressives won, Natalia Fernandez, seen as a much more moderate establishment candidate who was supported by the Bronx Democratic Party, also won against somebody who was a quote-unquote progressive Christian Amato. So that to me, it's like you follow it down the line, and all of a sudden there's one of these, and then you got to go back down the line. I'm trying to find trends, but I don't know that I see one. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, I think that the Bronx is pretty unique in terms of yeah. So
I do
the
that every
Bronx
week. Yes.
the Bronx is pretty unique in terms of its democratic politics. Certainly, it's the last borough with a really strong democratic machine
Yep.
that's really been able to kind of evolve with the times in ways that other machines haven't been able to, integrating more quote unquote progressive voices into the party apparatus compared to some of the other machines in other parts of the city. And I think that we kind of see, it doesn't always work out 100%. Gustavo Rivera, for example, uh, never really got along with the Bronx Party, has always been at odds with them, was at odds with 2 of the 3 last party leaders in the Bronx. But, in the case of someone like Natalia Fernandez, sure, she was backed by county, but she isn't necessarily wasn't seen as a quote unquote moderate per se. She was backed
But
by the
she
party,
was
sure, but it's and sure, she was going against Christian Amato, a former Alessandra Biaggi staffer, a
that's right.
self-styled progressive. But that, it kind of comes back to the idea of what is progressive, what is moderate. Can you be progressive and still part of the party apparatus? And you ask someone like Natalia Fernandez, and she'd probably say, yeah, you can still be progressive and
Right.
part of the apparatus. And if you look at who was working on her campaign, New Deal Strategies, for example, they generally work on progressive campaigns, and they
That's
were
right.
working hard for her, even though she was backed by the Bronx County. So it's there's nuance there, certainly.
Let's just talk before we run out of time about this idea of PACs, political action committees that spent a lot of money, certainly on the Rivera Camillo race. Um, to me, it's very disturbing because you could have big money supporting somebody or pushing somebody that maybe the people don't support, or and they could put out anything they want, whether it's true or not, and distort, and they put stuff out. Is there any chance that as this goes through evaluation, that the state legislature will take a look at this and say, you know what, maybe we ought to ramp down on the amount of money that can be spent?
Well, I don't know how much influence the state legislature can have, given the decision of Citizens United, which really just paved the way
Oh,
for
that's right. You're
super
right.
PACs and
Yes.
corporations spending money. So, I'm sure the legislature would love to crack down on outside spending, but I think that they're probably a little out of their depths, and that's more of an issue for
All right, you're right.
Congress or the
You're
Supreme
right.
Court.
You're right. Do you think that given the rancor, let's say in the Gustavo Rivera race, now that he's a state senator, and Jamal Bailey is going to be sitting in the same body that he is, do you think that they'll be able to get along and they'll just say, well, okay, bygones are bygones? I mean, we're going to talk to Senator Rivera on Bronx Talk next week to find out what he thinks. But the worst thing that could happen out of this is that it gets in the way of passing legislation like the Health Care Act or other things of significant importance.
From all the conversations I've had with both Gustavo Rivera and Jamal Bailey, they both seem to be. They're not taking it personally. They're not viewing it personally. Rivera himself has never been shy about letting it
Anything.
known, yes, about anything, but especially about letting it known when he has a bone to pick with party leadership. And he was, very much Jamal Bailey is someone I get along with. We're friendly. I've spoken
All
with him
right.
about this.
Yep.
Jamal Bailey says it's not personal. We backed Miguelina Camilo, and we decided to keep
Got it.
backing her. So whether or not that's just talk, we'll
We
see.
we got to run. Rebecca Lewis, you're a superstar. We love having you. We love reading what you write in City and State New York. Senior state politics reporter for City and State New York. Rebecca Lewis, thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks for having me on.
All right, we'll see what happens as we get to November. We're going to take a short break, and when we would come back, as I mentioned, we're going to talk about that book thing that's going on in the Bronx. Don't go away. Okay, thanks to Rebecca Lewis for joining us. Welcome back to the Bronx Buzz. And now, drum roll, please. I'm welcoming a friend of mine for a long time, and he's been doing just wonderful things in the Bronx. It is my buddy Ron Kavanaugh, who is the executive director of the Literary Freedom Project and One Book One Bronx. It's all about reading and writing, I guess. Nice to see you, Ron.
Thank you. Thank you. So good to be on your show again.
Again, yeah, who's counting? Let's just get it's just so people have a foundation here. What is the Literary Freedom Project, and
Mhm.
what is One Book One Bronx?
Sure. The Literary Freedom Project is a nonprofit that I run here in the Bronx. We are dedicated, as the name implies, to doing literary programs in the Bronx. We started out as a literary magazine, then that morphed into a conference, annual conference. And then about 3, 4 years ago, we started basically a book club, and it's called One Book One Bronx. And that book club is free and open to the public. Before the quarantine, when we met in person, we used to give everybody free books. We really wanted to make the barrier low to participating in these discussions. So normally we select a book, then we will come together and discuss that book over 5 weeks. We'll divide the book up into chapters, and each week we'll discuss different chapters of that book.
Before we get into what's coming up, which is something I'm excited about because I know about the writer that you
Mhm.
have focusing on. What was your motivation in getting this started? Like, why do this? And is it difficult to do it in the Bronx? I mean, it's a stereotype breaker, so to speak. Just tell me a little bit about, tell us a little bit about why,
Yeah.
what the motivation was to put this together.
Yeah. I wanted to connect people to their culture through books and reading. We primarily focus on Black and Latino readers, but the book club is open to anyone. And now we're not, we're probably still majority minority, but we have a healthy, um, population of all people who join us. And the idea was just for us to explore the histories and cultures, particularly of Black and Brown people, which for the most part, is a huge part of the population of the Bronx.
The
I
numbers
mean,
will show that for sure, no
yeah,
question.
we just wanted a place where we could come together and have these conversations.
Do people do it? You get people on there?
Oh my God, yes,
Really?
they.
That heartens me. I'm so thrilled.
Yeah, I have to admit, in the beginning, it wasn't so successful.
Alright.
It took a few years. Um, 2004, 2005, we only did it once. We couldn't get a momentum going. We also wanted to raise funds, and we just couldn't do it. And then around 2007 is when it caught on. So we were able to, I think we raised a good amount, at least enough to sort of buy books for everyone and do like 5 book clubs throughout the year. And it turns out we raised enough money that we could do about 9 book clubs. We used to meet in Bronx Art Space, and we were able to give everyone books who participated in the book club. And so we usually give out 25 books to the first 25
Right.
people. And there were weeks when we had over 50 people attending
Wow.
our book clubs. And online, we've had as many as 80 people.
I'm just guessing. I mean, it's just a guess on my part that maybe the pandemic helped out in terms of people were around,
Yeah.
home, and they were maybe doing. I'd like to think they were doing more reading, and they were looking for things to do, things that they
Mhm.
was interested in online. What are the most popular types of books that catch on and that attract people, or is the beauty of the Bronx? It's so diverse that it doesn't I don't want to say it doesn't matter, but people love
Yeah.
everything. All the
People
books
love
that are behind
everything.
me, for
Yeah,
example.
yeah. Yeah, people love everything. We read fiction, nonfiction, we've read
Wow.
poetry. The last book, actually, the last book we read was by a Bronx author. her name is escaping me now,
Okay.
Gabby Rivera.
Okay.
And she wrote a book, of course, Juliet Takes a Breath. It's about a young queer Latina growing up here in the Bronx who decides to, travel for school, and how her family, who is from the Bronx, sort of deals with her identity, but as well as, her leaving home, which, many of us face, growing up in the Bronx. You reach that age where you want to see the world, but your parents are kind of old fashioned and they want you to stay close to home. And yeah, we had over 30 people join us for that book club.
Fantastic.
Yeah, and I think before
Ron,
that,
Ron, it's just great when you think about what could be healthier. Getting people to read, getting people to talk about issues, expanding their mind. I mean, on and on and on and
yeah,
on. So let's talk about my friend Dalma Llanos Figueroa
yeah.
and her work, and what's she going to be doing, and what are you going to be doing through this process?
So we have a partnership with the Casita Maria Center for Arts and Education.
Right.
And we'll be reading Dalma Llanos Figueroa's second book, which is called A Woman of Endurance. And Dalma has been writing these sort of historical fiction books based on the slave trade and how it affects Puerto Rico and the Caribbean. So her first book was Daughters of the Stone, which
I
chronicled
believe we featured that here on this show.
you did have her on. And that book chronicled 5 generations of African women. And then the current book continues that. It doesn't continue the story, but it kind of sets it just in Puerto Rico and the impact of the slave trade on Puerto Rico, particularly Puerto Rican women. So we're going to start reading that book we're going to start the discussion of that book on September 6th.
Okay.
And we'll meet every week.
Wait. September 6th is a Tuesday.
Tuesday, correct.
Right. Okay.
And we'll meet for 5 weeks. So we'll meet the 6th, the 13th, the 20th, the 27th, and then October 4th.
Okay. And everybody will meet, and then they will talk about the book. That's what the process is.
Yeah, so people will read the book at home on their own, and then when we come together, we have a facilitator lead the conversation on that week's reading assignment. So like the book is like 350 pages. Divide that over 5 weeks, so that's about 70 pages every week we discuss. And then,
go ahead, Ron. I'm sorry.
And then the last session on October 4th, Dalma will join the conversation, and this is all virtual.
Are the books that you select by Bronxites specifically, or not necessarily? And it just, in this case, it is.
It just happens. I mean, we do give preference to Bronx writers. So we usually read 1 or 2. We usually read about 8 or 9 books a year, and out of that, maybe 2 books are Bronx writers. We are looking for, people who are published, people who are, I don't want to say mainstream, but have a following, because that reflects back on who will attend that, that conversation.
That's interesting. Yeah, that certainly helps build
like
an audience. Yeah. Who selects the books? Is it you?
It is partly
it could
me.
Be.
Yeah. It is partly me, but we actually have an open process now. So at the end of each year, our year is September through June. Usually in July, we send out a list of like 70 books for people to select from. And out of those selections, like the top vote getters is how we select the books.
I would think that the public libraries would love you.
I would think that also.
Is that not happening? I mean, it seems to me you're looking for a place to do it. We have a beautiful, in my neighborhood, a new beautiful Van Cortlandt library. There's plenty of reading space. And
yeah. there are a couple of logistic things that I
Oh,
didn't
okay.
really consider going into this.
Leave it to me to jump into something I shouldn't
That's
have.
all right. So we have partnered with the main branch, the Bronx Library Center,
That's good.
and
Yeah.
we did host the book club there for a few months. One of the issues we have is space.
Yes.
Oftentimes we think that these spaces are large enough, and they're not. So we need a
Yeah.
space to host 30 people
That's
sitting down.
That's right. That's a good right.
And also,
In a you know, in a circle, so to speak, because
yeah,
if you're in an
exactly.
auditorium, the Bronx Center, the Library Center has an auditorium, but
Yeah,
that's not conducive to this kind of
exactly.
dialogue.
And we used the auditorium. One time we had to use it, and it just was not a good setup.
Yeah,
The whole
it's
dynamic of people facing.
yeah, so maybe the virtual thing that, of course, we all got used to, even this program now during the pandemic, is useful to you. All right, so let's wrap it up by just reminding people. So you're working with Casita Maria
Right,
down in the South Bronx, but this is a virtual
correct.
process, right?
Yes.
And so why don't you repeat the dates, and then let's put up contact info so that people can know how to participate and get
Sure.
themselves involved, get their kids involved. You know,
Yeah, yeah.
let's really you know, expand our minds.
So the dates are September 6th, 13th, 20th, 27th, and October 4th. And on October 4th, Dalmayanos will join book club. This is virtual. For more information, you can just go to onebookonebronx.com.
And that
You
is
know,
ONE, not one, not number one.
right, it's all spelled out. It's the
One book.
word one.
There,
And just it's free and open to join. Yeah.
yeah, there are efforts out there. There's you know, the Bronx Bound books. I mean, they're out there, and then of
I think
course
she just got her second vehicle.
I saw them just the other day. I wasn't aware it was the second vehicle, but yeah, we got to keep doing this because this is how we keep us sane and smart. So Ron Kavanaugh, thank you so much for joining us. Thank you so much for the Literary Freedom Project and One Book One Bronx. I'm surrounded by books. You know, I got a ton of books here, Bronx books
Yeah.
that people have come on the show over the years. If you have somebody who's from the Bronx and written a book, you should let me know and we'll coordinate and promote it and do all that stuff. Thank you so much for what you do. I mean, we need
Thank
exactly this and more. We appreciate it.
Thank you so much, Gary.
All right, folks, that will do it for us for the Bronx Buzz. So, you know what's going to happen. You know what's going to happen. First of all, we want to thank Rebecca Lewis, and we do thank Ron Kavanaugh. We'll see you next week. Good night.